Well, they're ugly. It comes down to it. I mean,
I see.
they're big, they're ugly, and there's no recovery for someone who is a landowner who has to put up with the thing. So, when you build a solar facility or a wind farm, you have a natural and built-in advocate. It's the landowner who's going to get lease payments. It's going to be the community who's going to get tax revenue and production revenue from those facilities. And so, it's not impossible. Tomorrow, I got a really difficult solar facility down by Rochester. That the community is already really up in arms about, not my backyard. And so that does happen in those spaces. But naturally built into that is all the landowners who said, you know what, I want to grow solar panels. Okay, I want to grow solar panels, and I'm okay with the commission telling me that I got to build, pollinator friendly, grass under it, and I can also provide the township with a whole lot of revenue because of it. And so it starts smoothing things out as you go along with. That doesn't happen in a transmission line. You're sitting there, you're giving a utility the authority of eminent domain essentially to build this big ugly thing in my backyard. It's very difficult. It's just the inertia of people just being opposed to it every step of the way, and you don't really have that natural ally on the ground in the community. It's got to be a burnout job for these guys that go out and try to convince people that we're going to build on your property, and they constantly get pushed back. And so that's what makes it difficult. Nobody really wants to build these things. That's what makes building a 765 kV line, which requires a broader space to build on, and it's bigger, it's taller, it's uglier, and so that's going to be a challenge. And we've tried to. I struggle with this because you look at distribution lines that were built years ago in Minnesota. You basically told the utility, draw the shortest line possible. And so if you drive out in the landscape and you see some of the older erector set style power lines, they just go right through a field. I mean, they're right through the middle of the field, straight line. They're going to be very cost effective right from the load to the power plant. And that makes good sense until you're a farmer who has to farm around it. And so we had a big revolution in Minnesota back in the 1970s, where farmers were actually, conservative Midwest farmers were actually taking their blowtorches out and cutting down these transmission lines because they were so mad at the transmission companies. And so then we changed the law to say, look, we got to mitigate it. We got to almost treat a big 345 kV line like we do a distribution line, where you put it on the roadway and you skip over and miss this house here. And so now if you drive under existing power lines, so the newer ones, they're jumping all over the place. They'll go down a road here and they'll jump over here, and they'll, it's a challenge. I don't think we can do that with the 765. And so I don't know how we're going to do those. I think one of the challenges that we're going to look at, because it is tough. And that's what makes it tough. It's just communities don't want them. They're ugly. They don't get paid for them. There's property taxes that are tied to it, but nowhere near production tax or property tax you're going to get from a wind farm or from a solar facility. And so that is a challenge. I'm convinced that they're probably the best thing for us to have a reliable system, but they're the most difficult thing to build. And so that'll be the challenge. And that's why it takes sometimes 7 years. Or you look at Grain Belt, who's been trying to build down in
15 years.
Kansas. Even it's a great concept. I mean, if I were a wind farm owner in Kansas, I'd be all for it. But you can't quite convince people in Missouri. That's a great idea to make sure that power gets sent to Chicago. I mean, that's what they see. Even though that's exactly what's happening, that's what they see. And so it becomes very difficult. You get legislators will pop in and start passing laws to make it a challenge. So that's why it's hard, and it takes time.
So do you see then room for innovation with respect to transmission development, where some of the best parts of developing a wind farm or a solar farm on your land can be applied to transmission projects, and less of the use of eminent domain, instead more voluntary easement acquisition, where landowners are compensated accordingly for having those big poles on their land, which could help them, ease some of the fears and worries, for example?
One of the things we did in Minnesota at the time when there were tearing down the poles, was they did pass what was known as buy the farm. No other state has adopted it. I'm kind of surprised that they haven't. But we basically look at a landowner and say, if you're a residential landowner, if you're a farmer, or you're a recreational property like a resort, and we put 200 kV or bigger line on your property, you can force the utility to buy your property. Just move, and then they have to pay for moving costs. Our utilities have fought that. I mean, it's been a battle. It was forced upon them by the legislature. They didn't want it, and they just have a natural inclination to be opposed to it. I think they have to embrace it, and I've been very, very vocal about that with them, is to embrace it, because no matter what you do with these big lines, even if you do all the moving around and mitigating, there's going to be for every 10 mile, there's going to be a pinch point. There's going to be something that happens where you got to go through somebody's backyard. That's just, you feel bad about it, but it's the only thing you can do. Otherwise, you got to go through 5 other people's backyard over here. And I think they just should be upfront with that person and walk up to them and say, this is probably what's going to happen. If you don't like it, we will help you move. We'll pay for the moving costs, and we'll buy your property. And I think that's what our roads do. That's what when we build a road, if it infringes on somebody's property, that's what we do. So I think it's more of just being upfront with landowners and saying, look, if you don't want to deal with these things, we're going to buy it, and then we just turn around and sell it. And so the next buyer buys it, knowing I got to work around a power line. And so I think that law was actually innovative and thoughtful back when we did it. It's just that our utilities have fought it. And I really think when we get to the 765, Minnesota needs to embrace that and just be upfront with landowners. Utilities right now, they treat that as a litigation thing. It's like they don't even talk about it. And then the minute a landowner finds out about that law, they what they said is they move it up the ladder. So it goes up to the senior litigators. So there are people out there buying the property, aren't even talking about it. And then when somebody says, I'm going to make you buy my farm, then it gets tipped up to litigation, and the attorneys end up fighting. And I think that's a mistake. I think we should just be upfront. And actually, when we started talking about this, we went to the Department of Transportation and asked them, how do you handle this? Because they have a very similar obligations under buy the farm that our roads have when they have a person that's going to be displaced. They got to help them move. They got to offer them, assistance. They got to, all these things that we're not doing. They just wait for the litigation to start and the attorneys to start fighting with each other, where we could have been right up front with that landowner and say, move. The saddest one thing I've had was there was a couple, they were, seniors, and they were wanting to move, and they were mad because they weren't going to be able to sell their property. And they weren't going to be able to sell their property because this line was coming in. The utility could have come right up from them and said, don't worry, not only we're going to buy your property, we'll help you move into your assisted living that you wanted to. It would have been a win-win for them. Instead, it turned into them getting scolded by, the commission. And I wasn't even the most vigorous in scolding them when they came in front of us. It's like, what were you thinking? But that's just the nature of how we develop this. And I think we really have to change the way we think about them. And I think more payment. And I think you're right. I think it should not be just what was the value of your property. We should just pay you for the inconvenience of having it on your property. And I think that's it's going to cost more, but I think in the end it could speed up the permitting process if you can now walk in the person and say, I can pay you, I can either buy your place or I can pay you a premium for having this ugly thing on your property. And it does pass on to ratepayers, and we have to be concerned about that. But I think in the long run, it probably is going to be cheaper because it's you get these things done faster and without as much problem, less attorneys involved. I guess that's a good thing.
Yeah, I agree.